Imagine a world without the voice. A world where thoughts traveled at the speed of the fastest horse, and secrets were whispered only to the wind. For millennia, humanity's greatest distance was the reach of our own voices. We shouted across valleys and sent messages on the backs of birds, but we never truly conquered the silence between two distant souls. We dreamed of it, a dream that felt as old as the stars. We drew diagrams and wrote down formulas, all in search of the impossible, to make a whisper heard 100 miles away. We all knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't know how we would do it. And then, in the heart of the Gilded Age, two men, driven by different dreams and a shared obsession, stood on the precipice of discovery that would change everything. The question wasn't if the voice could travel through a wire, but whose voice would get there first. This is a story of a race against time, a battle for a patent that would become one of the most litigated inventions in history, a tale of ambition, a flash of genius, and a quiet, deafening silence before the world heard its first electric voice. This is the story of the patent war over the telephone. Before we can talk about the patent war over the telephone, we have to understand the world it was born into. It was a world of steam engines and telegraphs, where information traveled not by sound, but by a staccato series of clicks and beeps, a language of dots and dashes. Samuel Morse's telegraph had already revolutionized communication, shrinking the vast American continent into a network of buzzing wires. But the telegraph had a problem, a fundamental flaw that left a gaping hole in the market for human connection. It couldn't carry the human voice. It was a translator, not a conduit, and it was expensive, requiring skilled operators to decode every single message. In this world, the idea of transmitting a voice was considered the stuff of science fiction. The most brilliant minds of the era, including Thomas Edison, were obsessed with it. They saw the potential of a speaking telegraph, a device that could carry the subtle nuances, the emotion, and the very soul of a person's voice over long distances. But the scientific principles were daunting. How do you convert the complex vibrations of a voice into an electrical signal, and then convert it back again? It seemed like a problem for the gods. Yet, two men, living just miles apart, were on the verge of solving it. Our story begins with two very different protagonists. On one side, we have Alexander Graham Bell, a name now synonymous with the invention itself. But before he was a legendary inventor, he was a teacher of the deaf, a passionate advocate for the hearing impaired. His mother was profoundly deaf, and his father, Melville Bell, developed a system called visible speech, a set of symbols that showed how to make sounds. This was Bell's world, a world where he was constantly trying to make the invisible audible, to give a voice to those who had none. Bell's background wasn't just a biographical detail. It was the very foundation of his invention. He understood sound in a way few others did. He knew that a human voice wasn't just a simple vibration. It was a complex waveform with multiple frequencies. He didn't just want to transmit a sound. He wanted to transmit the quality of that sound. His work with the deaf had trained his ear, his mind, and his very soul to pay attention to the subtle modulations of speech. He saw the potential for a device that could not only transmit a voice, but also potentially help the deaf see and feel sound. Meanwhile, a different kind of genius was at work. In his own workshop in Grays Lake, Illinois, labored Elisha Gray. Gray was a quintessential American tinkerer. He was a co-founder of the Western Electric Manufacturing Company, and he was a brilliant electrical engineer with a knack for practical applications. Unlike Bell, Gray was a pragmatist. He was less interested in the lofty goal of helping the deaf and more focused on the commercial problem of the telegraph. He saw the potential for sending multiple telegraph messages over a single wire, a technology known as multiplexing, and he believed the same principles could be applied to sound. Elisha Gray's approach was methodical and direct. He was already a respected figure in the electrical world, and he had the backing of a major corporation. While Bell worked with tuning forks and ethereal theories, Gray was building working prototypes. He was trying to solve a known problem with known tools. He was, in many ways, the favorite in this race, a seasoned professional with a clear path to victory. The race wasn't a secret. Both men knew others were working on the same problem. They were both racing against the clock, and more importantly, against each other. The key lay in one fundamental challenge: how to create a variable electrical current that perfectly mirrored the vibrations of the human voice. This was the holy grail of telephony. It was known as the variable resistance method. Bell's breakthrough came from an accidental observation. While working on his harmonic telegraph, a device to send multiple messages at once, a piece of equipment became over-energized and buzzed. His assistant, Thomas A. Watson, was trying to fix it. This wasn't a eureka moment in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of theoretical work. Bell had already drawn diagrams of a device that could transmit sound using a vibrating diaphragm and a magnetic field. But the buzzing of that reed and the resulting humming sound created was the final piece of the puzzle. It showed him that a continuous, undulating current, not just a series of on-off pulses, was the key. He had a theory, but did he have a working model? Meanwhile, Elisha Gray had his own moment of genius. Working in his laboratory in Chicago, he created what he called a liquid transmitter. His design was elegant and simple. A diaphragm attached to a needle that dipped into a cup of liquid. As sound vibrated the diaphragm, the needle moved deeper or shallower into the liquid, varying the electrical resistance of the circuit. It was a brilliant solution, a physical manifestation of the variable resistance method, in a stroke of unfortunate timing. However, Gray was at home in Chicago while his lawyers were in Washington, D.C. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. On February 14th, 1876, the race reached its climax. Both men's lawyers arrived at the U.S. Patent Office. Alexander Graham Bell's lawyer filed his application for a patent. A mere few hours later, Elisha Gray's lawyer arrived to file a caveat. A caveat was a kind of legal declaration of intent. It wasn't a patent application itself, but a notice to the Patent Office that Gray was working on a specific invention and intended to file for a patent in the future. It was a preemptive strike, a way to protect his idea. The question of who filed first became the stuff of legend. For decades, it was believed that Bell's application arrived just hours before Gray's caveat. But as historians and biographers like Robert V. Bruce and Robert T. Brady have meticulously researched, the timeline is more complex and far more controversial. The truth, as revealed in historical records, is that Bell's application was a formal patent, while Gray's was a caveat. A patent application has a higher legal standing, and even if Gray's lawyer had arrived minutes before Bell's, the patent would likely have been granted to Bell, as his was a completed application. Regardless of the timing, what happened next was a whirlwind. Bell's patent, U.S. Patent number 174,465, was granted on March 7, 1876, titled Improvements in Telegraphy. The patent drawings, now iconic, showed a device remarkably similar to what we would now call a telephone. 3 days later, on March 10, 1876, Bell uttered the now famous words into his experimental telephone. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." Watson, in a nearby room, heard the voice distinctly. The voice had traveled through a wire. The impossible had been achieved. The granting of the patent was not the end of the story. It was merely the beginning of the war. Elisha Gray was, understandably, furious. He saw Bell's success not as a triumph of genius, but as a legal injustice. He believed that Bell had somehow, through either inside information or sheer luck, beaten him to the patent office with a similar, if not identical, idea. Gray's lawyers immediately went to court, and the legal battle began. This wasn't just a feud between two inventors. It was a battle of corporate giants. Bell's patent was soon acquired by the newly formed Bell Telephone Company, a small upstart with big ambitions. On the other side was Western Union, the undisputed king of the telegraph. They were a monopolistic behemoth, and they saw the telephone as a direct threat to their business. Western Union, armed with patents from inventors like Elisha Gray and even Thomas Edison, who had a much-improved carbon microphone, decided to challenge Bell's patent head-on. They hired the best lawyers money could buy and declared war. The legal battles raged for years. The first major case was the telephone cases, which made its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1887. The central question was this: did Bell's patent, which outlined the principle of transmitting voice, take precedence over Gray's later, but perhaps more commercially viable device? The court's decision was a landmark in patent law. They ruled in favor of Bell, solidify his claim to the invention. The court concluded that while others, including Gray, had conceived of the idea, Bell was the first to not only conceive of the concept, but also successfully apply for and receive the patent that described a method for transmitting and receiving speech. This wasn't the end, however. Over the next decade, the Bell Telephone Company faced over 600 lawsuits challenging the validity of its patents. Every disgruntled inventor, every competitor, and every company that wanted a piece of the telephone business came after them. The legal fees were astronomical, and the pressure was immense. But the Bell Company, armed with its powerful legal team and the Supreme Court's precedent, fought them all off. One of the most intriguing and contentious cases involved a man named Antonio Meucci. Meucci was an Italian immigrant who, many historians argue, developed a working telephone-like device as early as the 1850s. He even filed a caveat in 1871, similar to Gray's, but he couldn't afford to renew it. His story is a poignant one, a testament to the struggles of an inventor without financial backing. In 2002, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution acknowledging Meucci's work, a largely symbolic gesture, but it reignited the debate over who truly invented the telephone. The patent wars over the telephone weren't just about money or ego. They were about control. They were about who would own the very fabric of human connection. The Bell Company, by virtue of its legal victories, became a powerful monopoly. By the early 20th century, it had a near total control of the telephone network in the United States. This monopoly, while a result of a patent, also had far-reaching consequences. It led to the creation of the AT&T empire. It wasn't until the breakup of Bell in 1984 that the telephone industry was truly open to competition. The story of the telephone and its patent wars is a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of intellectual property. It shows us that in the world of invention, the first to conceive of an idea isn't always the first to profit from it. The legal protections of a patent and the ability to defend it are just as important as the flash of inspiration itself. Elisha Gray, for all his brilliance, made a fatal error by filing a caveat instead of a full patent application. He had the right idea, but Bell had the right paperwork. Today, the telephone is no longer a luxury but a fundamental part of our lives. From the bulky black devices of the early 20th century to the smartphones in our pockets, the basic principle remains the same. The vibrations of our voices are converted into a signal, and that signal travels instantly across the globe. We owe this incredible convenience to a handful of brilliant minds, and to the fierce battles they fought over a simple idea, to make a voice heard. The legacy of Alexander Graham Bell, and the telephone is a complex one. He was a brilliant inventor, a tireless innovator, and a man who was deeply committed to his work. But his story is also intertwined with the stories of others, of Elisha Gray, who came so close, of Antonio Meucci, who was forgotten by history, and of the thousands of people who worked to turn a brilliant invention into a global network. It is a story of genius, legal battles, and the relentless march of progress. And so we return to our question, what if Elisha Gray had filed a full patent application? What if Antonio Meucci had been able to afford his fees? The telephone as we know it might look different, might be owned by a different company, but the essential fact remains, the human voice would still have found a way to travel. The story of the telephone isn't just about one man's genius. It's a testament to the shared human desire to connect, to bridge the distance, and to make our voices heard. But I want to hear from you. What do you think is the most surprising detail in this? Was it the close call between Bell and Gray, or the forgotten genius of Antonio Meucci? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories of forgotten inventions and epic patent wars, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Until next time, keep listening and keep asking questions.